Good evening, afternoon, night, morning, where you find a way to watch or listen to this podcast. It's me, Omar, again with an old pal. You may not have seen last year, but you probably certainly heard us talk along with Andrew Batista on the great Northeast, I guess, football recap we did weekly on Sundays. I know that time's coming again this year. Hopefully pick that up soon. But I'm joined by John Paul Glowatz, good friend of mine.
Thanks for having me, Omar.
Yeah, and of course a Northeast aficionado. I mean, of course that's your calling card. And so this week, I mean, the conference realignment, it usually doesn't touch the Northeast. But like the rare hurricane, kind of like I guess kind of like Hurricane Sandy was like a kind of like a rare hurricane for the Northeast. The hurricane of realignment reached the Northeast in terms of Army being implicated in the American. And so that's kind of like the main point of our discussion today. Because like at first for me, I know a lot of Army fans that may stumble across this may hate that I'm saying the C word repeatedly, conference. So with that in mind, like I thought UMass was like the first team, because of a number of factors, but we're gonna get into it. But starting off with the Army news, I mean, what's your thoughts on Army being implicated as a football only member in the American?
So first, I want to say that the Northeast has been implicated for a while now. There's a lot of rumors of UConn to the Big 12. Obviously, that didn't happen, and maybe that was just a smokescreen the whole time for the Big 12 wanting to get the four corner schools out west. But there was a lot of smoke to it. But in any case, I, for one, as just a Northeast aficionado, not an Army fan, would be super ecstatic about Army to the ACC, or I'm sorry, the AAC. I would, well, I mean, I think it would be arguably better than what we've seen with Navy in the AAC the last whatever since like 2015 or so. As long as Army and Navy keep their annual game, which I'm sure they will. I can't imagine any of this deal involves getting rid of the Army Navy game. But I think Army's, in my opinion, needed a home, needed a place to a conference that they'll have consistent scheduling. Will bolster their strength of schedule generally. And it's just tough to be playing a 12 game season, as a player, and if you're not one of the top, four or five teams, what you want to play for is to win your conference championship, for 128 teams across the country, like that's the goal, or maybe 124 or 100 whatever, minus the independents, but like I think last year, I remember, Jim Mora and the Yukon squad, basically they like created their own conference, within their schedule, like their teams are doing things like that to try to keep their guys motivated and keep their heads right, and certainly independence is okay. Like you can do it, but, to win your conference for most teams throughout the country, like that's the goal.
Yeah, and I mean I would agree because like you mentioned UConn. I think UConn's an interesting comparison to Army being the well one of three Northeast independents. And if you look at the schedules, like UConn has kind of used their reputation as a former Big East school, former automatic qualifier to like their advantage, like where they schedule multiple Power Five games a year. And compared to Army, you have schedules like in 2019 where the only Power Five game was a game against Michigan. And like I think a good friend of mine at Brigade Review, a great Army Twitter account, he said like in the past 10 years, Army scheduled two FCS teams 7 years out of 10. So that's already an increased hurdle to bowl season, an increased hurdle to more revenue, like we are doing this year with two FCS teams. But UConn's been able to schedule like multiple Power Five teams, like at home. They get, I think, like four Power Five teams this year. This year, Army gets four Power Five teams, but I feel like a lot of Army fans see this as an argument against joining a conference when really, any year we get three ACC schools, that's an anomaly. I mean, and we should know better to know that this is an anomaly rather than, the norm. So that's definitely I guess playing into the opposition as well. And I mean just looking at like the independent schedules in the future, I love the move of joining the American. There's just a lot of quality programs. Especially like a lot of group of five kind of brands, like especially like Memphis comes to mind, East Carolina, teams that have been group of five like in the mix for a while. But looking at Army's future schedules, games against Liberty, Rice, Tulsa, ULM. I mean, these don't scream national schedule, like the schedule of a national brand. I mean, I think Army fans have to get out of this 1944 mindset, and just realize that yes, we are in the Army, but you know, it's not working. The independent schedule isn't working as great for us anymore.
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, Navy's been doing it for 7, 8 years in the American. I think it would be a boon. And I mean, I don't know how much Army and Navy really care about the increased revenue, but certainly it doesn't hurt.
Yeah, I mean, and the visibility as well too, because I mean, I've had the conversation many times this year. I guess we were talking before we went live about subscription and stuff, and I told people that if I wasn't an Army fan, I would honestly like not subscribe to YouTube TV because you know Army's on CBS Sports Network and YouTube TV has CBS Sports Network. I'd be just fine with ESPN Plus and Peacock, but that increased visibility would put a lot of Army fans like me out of that bind for sure. So it's definitely an advantage. And also too with the Army Navy game, I do want to note like that they will figure it out for sure. The powers that be, and it definitely helps that the American doesn't use divisions anymore because I think I forget when they were having that talk about Army joining the American. I feel like that like the conversation came up at some point before they split it. They ended the divisional split, and it would have been awkward for like every year, Army and Navy to be maybe in the same division, but yet Army and Navy never play each other as an actual conference game. Now that's much more realistic with like I think the Americans doing I think two permanent or no, they have one permanent rival per school. Everything else is just, you get the Excel sheet and figure it out. So
Yeah. Now, I think the only way to do this is they would have to have the Army Navy game as a non-con game every year. And you could see a scenario in which Army and Navy end up in the AAC championship game one week, and then the next week is the annual Army Navy game. It's certainly possible, but to me, I'm not a college football purist. I'm not an Army Navy purist or anything like that. So to me, I think that would just kind of be like a fun, quirky type thing that happens only really in college sports. But I would love to hear your opinion on that sort of a scenario as an actual Army fan.
so for me, I feel like if that scenario comes up where it's like the American, I guess the AAC title game is an Army Navy game, it's like we all know that American, I guess like conference championship games are cash grabs anyway. So like I would say just cancel the championship game and make the actual Army Navy game itself, the conference title game. Because I mean, I do think that conference championship games have become a waste of time for the most part. When like especially like last year too, where the example that comes to mind is TCU Kansas State in the Big 12 title game where yes, Kansas State won the conference championship, and it was a great story, but it really didn't it really didn't change anything for the Big 12. I mean, TCU still made the playoff with a 12-1 record. So it's like, it was just a formality, just some window dressing on a fun Big 12 season. So that's just my thing. I feel like if that scenario came down to it, I feel like it would be very awkward for the rivalry, and I feel like the powers that be would just say, "Hey, look, we'll just make the actual Army Navy game a gentleman's agreement that whoever wins this game wins the American."
Hey, it would be cool if it worked that way, but I highly doubt it. Now the other scenario is if one of Army or Navy makes the championship game, the conference championship game, then the next week for the Army Navy game, they're going to be at a fairly significant disadvantage with the other of the two having a bye essentially.
Yeah, I mean that happened in 2016, notably when Army ended the streak, and like yeah, you can put an asterisk against it. I guess it's just the name of the game. Like back then the argument was like, yeah, Navy joined a conference and it's kind of on them, and Army had 3 weeks of
Yeah,
rest to go into Army Navy. And also it also didn't help that on the same play their starting slot back and quarterback were like both had broken legs. Like probably the biggest like freak play I've seen in my life. But But yeah, like
Yeah,
that being said, I mean, it's just a gamble you take, I guess, like with these type of
yeah,
situations, all part of the game.
yeah. And conceivably, like in this scenario, it might actually be a little bit better because if one of the two is in the conference championship game, that means that they're probably stronger in that given year than the other, and so maybe it actually evens things out a little. I don't know if that's good or bad, but for the kind of the neutral fan, it might make for a more fun game.
Yeah, I mean, I agree because everything I hear is that, the Army Navy game's unwatchable, I guess. So anything to make the Army Navy game more palatable to casual football fans, I'm all here for, because that's all I hear for the most part. Like, oh, it's low scoring. I mean, the game's just on TV because it's tradition. So anything to make it more watchable. I mean, I don't think the rivalry can get any more even than it is right now, but anything to help the rivalry go, I'm all for it.
Yeah, no doubt.
But going on to the other independent Northeast school, wanted to talk about UMass, which I originally thought would have been the target for the American because Conference USA, and I think honestly the shocker of the whole realignment scenario is them getting those schools to sign a grant of rights. I mean, I guess there's some value in knowing your own value, and those Conference USA
Hmm.
schools know their value, and they sign the grant of rights. So that being said, like I do think that the grant of rights or Comp say is kind of chump change for a lot of for the American because like doing the math, like yes, there might be an exit fee, but if you divide the 800,000 per year for the contract, like to I guess to opt out, that's just 63,000 per school. And I mean that's like way less than I think that's about like 1% of the actually I think I might do my math wrong. That's a small amount of the yearly American Conference media rights. But with that being said, like the American could save itself a lot of money by adding UMass. So I want to know your thoughts. Like I'm not just in a frenzy after UMass won week 0. I've long been a advocate for UMass joining a conference.
Yeah, I don't think it's realistic at this point. I think UMass's football team has just been down for so long. Um, the rest of the sports aside from hockey are pretty pretty solid in the A10. Um, I don't think it's realistic on either side really. I don't think they seem that attractive to the American, and I don't think it would be that attractive to UMass aside from the football program. So I think that UMass and any team that's in the G5 outside of the American, should be playing the long game and should be attempting to build their program and see what happens in a few years, 3 4 5 years. Maybe they can make a move at that point. If Don Brown gets things really really humming and UMass is able to string together a couple of bowl eligible seasons and maybe a couple bowl wins, then I could see it. It seems like it would be a lot more palatable. But for a team that's not had a ton of success in quite a long time, I don't see it.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree in terms of success, but I feel like in terms of like market potential, like the New England schools they're kind of different cases where it's like their markets aren't really restricted into like their, pinpoint location or like the Boston market or Springfield market for UMass. I feel like, UMass has plenty of alums in the New England area that would watch the Minutemen if, they'd have a vested reason to watch UMass football if they're playing in the American. And then I guess like on top of that as well, I guess if you want to keep Temple happy, I don't know how much the American wants to keep Temple happy. I mean, Temple's kind of an afterthought nowadays, but they do have potential as, I mean, of course, basketball program and I mean, football showed some strides in their time in the American. I mean, I feel like adding UMass would keep Temple happy, but I guess beyond that, I do see what you're saying, honestly. And I feel like definitely the American probably sees staying at 13 as a better move than just adding. I'd hate to use the term dead weight because that's just like insulting, but I can't think of a better term in terms of UMass.
Yeah, I think the Americans showed in the last round of realignment that they really wanted to recenter and refocus, as a Southern conference. I think they pivoted to, a couple of up and coming schools who were in the South and were in large markets, kind of betting on, the extra boost in athletic budget and whatnot will build those teams up. So I'd be surprised if they were interested in UMass in general or interested in keeping Temple happy. Yeah, I think they're interested in Army because Army is kind of an exception to that, and both in terms of brand recognition, also in terms of I would say regionality. The service academies are more of American teams all the way around, rather than just like home in their own city or region of the country. I mean, for goodness sakes, Navy was playing in the AAC West, because they wanted a more of a foothold in Texas and whatnot. So I think the service academies are a bit of an exception, but I'd be surprised if at this point UMass would get an invite, and if they got the invite, I'd be surprised if they accepted it.
Dang, I mean, shoot. I wouldn't be surprised if they accepted it, honestly, because I mean the revenue speaks. Like I think I did like a comparison, I guess, in terms of the geography, where it's like the A10 is already kind of I wouldn't say a sprawling conference, but it's like Loyola Chicago and St. Louis aren't exactly easy trips for that athletic department to make. Granted, they're not, they're not going to San Antonio and Houston at the moment, but I feel like, the $7 million payoff would offset that, because I think the math for like the A10, because the A10, I feel like anytime a conference doesn't release how much they're getting paid for their deal, they're kind of, I guess they're kind of embarrassed by the amount they're getting paid. Like, I know the CAA tried to put window dressing when they signed their deal and said they're signing, I think, an 8-figure deal, which like if it's 8 figures, it's probably 10 or 11 million, for the whole contract, which like the A10, when they signed their extension, there is no dollar signs anywhere. So I can't imagine they're being paid that much more than the original contract in 2013, which paid each school around 333,000, I think. So if UMass is traveling to Chicago and St. Louis with money like that, I mean, I'd like to think that the national TV, the potential bowl payouts, and college football playoff payouts would like offset, going to Tulsa, such tourist destinations as Tulsa. I guess that's just a long way to say I think they'd accept it. But I guess something else I wanted to ask, like with you being more of a college basketball guy than me, I've long held the belief that UMass is an overrated program in terms of like history wise, because aside from the Calipari years, there's really not much to show in terms of UMass being a basketball power. And I think that they would benefit from a fresh start in the American. And I also kind of think I'm a huge A10 fan. Watched a few Fordham basketball games in college at Rose Hill Gym. Loved the league, but I just think the A10's in decline. So it's like all the UMass fans that hold basketball, as the program driving the bus, I do feel like it's kind of misguided. So I want to know your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Yeah, certainly the A10 was down last year. They're probably never going to get back to 4, 5, 6 bids in a year. They can probably get back to 2 or 3. I certainly think that some of the coaches coming into the league, like Frank Martin or Miller at URI, some of those guys, like, they can build programs like that. Give them a little time. I think they'll have things humming. So I think maybe the rumors of the A10's demise might be a little over exaggerated. But I also think the American is going to be taking a pretty big step back too. Losing Houston, losing Cincinnati, certainly hurts for their basketball team. SMU even had some really good years there with Larry Brown. Now they're leaving. I think we're going to see even more teams leaving the American as they can. I mean, I think Memphis is one that you were mentioning earlier. I don't think they're there for the long term. So, FAU comes in like that. That's a nice pickup for basketball for this year, but that was a surprise, and I wouldn't expect that to be consistently great. So, year in and year out, I would be, yeah, I'd say that the American and the A10 are probably going to be pretty much lockstep in terms of competitiveness. At least in the near future here. I mean, we'll see what happens down the line. One of them might separate themselves, but I think what we've seen with a lot of teams, that are outside of that power two or even power four, is that the geography, the regionality, really is important for them. Like they're not getting 50 million a year, they're not getting 20 million a year, they're not. I mean, most of them, aside from the American, not even getting close to 7 million a year. So trying to fly all over the country is a real burden to those athletic departments. And yeah, the A10, you have to go to Chicago and St. Louis, but if you're an East Coast school, there's Amherst, there's Rhode Island, St. Bonaventure, like the list of schools that are in close proximity is much more than there would be in the American.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree, and I mean, as a college athletics purist, I would hurt to see rivalries like URI, UMass, St. Bonaventure, UMass, just like going away. Richmond as well. I guess Richmond as well has been in the A10 for a long time. But I mean, I guess if UMass does go back to the American, we get the UMass Temple rivalry
Yeah,
minus John Chaney threatening to
yeah.
kill John Calipari. That'll be missing, but
Hey
it'll be
man,
back.
yeah. Did you just see that Duke blocked the uh, field goal?
I did. I mean, I kind of think
Yeah,
Duke upsetting Clemson would be like too good to be true. As I'm watching
yeah,
this, because Duke hangs around. I think against Clemson. I mean, they've done it a few times, but we'll see.
yeah, man. I just hope they hang on for a little bit longer. Like if they can go into halftime at least like hanging, then I'll probably just go to sleep at that point. So it won't matter.
Go to
It
sleep
won't
and hope
matter
for
to
the
me.
best. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
When
yeah,
you
no,
have
I
when
agree.
you have kids, that's all. And if you're on the East Coast and you have kids, all you need is the game to be close into halftime because you're not going to make it for the second half.
I mean, that's good to know. Hopefully, hopefully I stay in the West Coast and raise kids then, so I can
Yeah,
truly enjoy the thrills. But I guess as we close, I know I mentioned at the beginning the long game. It's going back to Army. Do you think the long game for Army should be waiting for the ACC's downfall, which from the looks of like their independent schedules and just Army being Army, like I do think that they can hold strong for until I think it's like 2036 until I guess Florida State and Clemson would leave, then wait for those schools to, leave and the mass exodus to happen. And then you have Joe Pa's dream, the good old East Coast Conference and Army for Army and Navy to hop in.
yeah, for sure. I mean, any team that all the teams that we've been mentioning here, that are in the Northeast, should be targeting that 2036 or thereabouts. Who knows if things break up a little early, as the time to strike when the iron's hot. I mean, certainly we know that teams are going to get poached from the ACC. Whether what happens at that point, is certainly up for grabs. But at the very least, we're going to see the teams that voted against adding the Calford expansion. Those teams are definitely going to leave. We're definitely going to see FSU, Clemson, and UNC go. So if those are the only three, certainly things look a lot tighter for the ACC. They probably try to bolster up a little bit, and things maybe get a little bit more difficult. But if the Big 12 then starts coming and poaching, say NC State, Louisville, Pitt, those sort of teams, then things get real dicey for the ACC, and they might go the way of the Pac-12, or they're able to bolster with Army, Navy, UConn, UMass, Buffalo, whoever else might be, doing well on the East Coast or thereabouts at that time. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, so much of this expansion is timing. right? Or conference realignment is timing. You got to make sure that your athletic department is in tip top shape when the mid 2030s come around.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I guess when the 2030s come around, I mean, or sooner, honestly. Like who knows at this point? I mean, we are I mean, I'd hate to be a doomsday guy, but like, seems like a lot of people are saying that we're watching the downfall of college athletics. So who knows if you know, we'll be looking at a completely different college athletics, come 2036. And who knows if the NCAA football game will be released by 2036. Because from the looks of it, it looks like we'll never be released. But anyway, that's another topic. But I mean, just a lot to think of. It looks like this conference alignment is never over, and now I mean, the unlikely party like Army is implicated in it. So I guess we'll just see what happens.
Yeah, that's all we can do.
So I mean, John, I mean, do you have anything final to add? Any shameless plugs? I guess any Penn State shout outs, UConn shout outs, or anything?
Man, I didn't think about that. Not really. I guess I guess I'm happy with with performance of both teams. Penn State did took care of business against West Virginia. UConn looked decent against NC State. So we'll see how it goes. But I think both programs are in good hands as it sits right now.
I would agree. I mean, definitely on firm ground. Unlike Army at this time, which I'm not gonna freak out or anything. It's a new offense to rebuild here. Just rebuilds, just they just suck. There's nothing else to it. But just that being said, um, thanks for joining, John. Really appreciate it. Hopefully you can start up the Northeast rush again. But until next time, everyone, peace, love, and soul.